I don't know that you learned a ton from the Clemson spring game. The two scholarship quarterbacks, Cade Klubnik and Chris Vezina, they were fine, but it wasn't particularly knock your socks off. But again, it's a spring game. They're not going to try to wow you. But it's interesting. We had Roddy Jones on last week talking about Clemson, and I found something he said very interesting. And then coincidentally, the same day we recorded that, when Dabo Swinney had a press conference and kind of elaborated. He got asked a question about it and elaborated on it. And I think it's an interesting discussion to have regarding Clemson. And it kind of fits into the discussion we were having about John Calipari these past few weeks. So let me play what Roddy said when he was on the show last week, and then I'll play you what Dabo said. So here's Roddy.
And the thing that alarms me about Clemson now, Andy, is they've started to dip into it in terms of recruiting guys, particularly in the offensive line, and they haven't been good at it. So the speed dating of the transfer portal, Clemson hasn't adjusted to. They went after reportedly like 5 offensive linemen. None of them chose Clemson. It's developmental relationship type recruiting that they're very good at, and they're very good at it at the high school level. But it feels like the speed dating of the portal, they haven't quite adjusted.
So that's Roddy Jones from the ACC Network, and understands the landscape in that conference better than almost anybody. And he's explaining why you haven't seen Clemson really embrace the transfer portal or embrace it at all. They've tried to use it a little bit, as he mentioned, but not in the ways, obviously not as drastically as Florida State, and not in the ways that some other schools have used it to kind of just grab every once in a while somebody who can plug and play and be a starter right away. That's what Georgia does. That's what Alabama has done. That's what Michigan did really well the last 2 years. Dabo Swinney got asked about his recruiting style, and this is a question about his high school recruiting. But when you listen to him talk about it and explain it, you can kind of extrapolate and figure out why it's been so hard for him to embrace the transfer portal. So here's what Dabo said last week.
I mean, I just think we know what we're looking for. You know, we're not all things to all people. I think we've offered 55 or 56 kids so far in this class of 25. You know, our hit rate's really high. You know, if we offer a kid, there's a good chance, you know, we might get them. And, you know, I don't know. I've just always wanted our offer to mean something. You know, I've never really wanted to water our brand down and, you know, offer kids that they're not even interested, you know. And that's part of it. But I just think evaluation is key. Retention is key. Development is key. And, you know, you win with people. And that's how we've won here. You know, we've won with consistency, and we've won with those areas: evaluation, retention, development. And so we're usually done by August every year. We don't usually have maybe there's a random spot here or there, or somebody leaves that we didn't anticipate or know about yet, or a junior goes pro, you know, whatever. And you kind of address that. But you know, it's just as we've had success and as our brand has grown and we've got kids that are interested from all kind of different places all over, you know, I want our offer to mean something, you know, and that's why we don't offer freshmen and sophomores. You know, it's a developmental game. There's a lot of great players that have been here at Clemson that would have never gotten an offer as a 10th grader, you know, because they weren't good enough. You know, and wouldn't have got many offers from many places, but especially kids that are 14 to 18, and the transformation and the development happens there. So we just always wanted to be slow and right and fast and wrong. And, you know, we've made some mistakes in the past, like anybody. You're never going to bat 1,000, but, you know, I think the biggest thing is we know the fit here. And, you know, we know what we think is the standard at each position and what we're looking for, criteria. And, you know, we again, our hit rate is pretty good.
So that that makes sense. When you listen to how Dabo talks about how they have built their recruiting apparatus over the years, the offer has to mean something. Other schools will offer 200 players, 250 players in a cycle. And they don't really mean that you can come and have a scholarship there. They mean we're quote unquote offering you, and we want you to come to camp. And then if we see you at camp and decide that you're good enough, then we might actually give you the real offer. Clemson doesn't work that way. When you get offered by Clemson, it is a real offer. It is a scholarship. You can come and be one of their 85 scholarship players if you accept. That is very different than a lot of schools. The problem is in the transfer portal era, and I've talked to personnel people, to coaches, to players who've been, who've transferred. The way it really works is the guy goes into the portal, and usually the personnel people already know 2-3 days before the guy goes into the portal that he's going in the portal. You offer immediately. The way those schools do it, the ones that use the transfer portal a lot, they offer immediately. That doesn't necessarily mean they want to take them, but they want to get in the door. That gets their foot in the door. And then, as Roddy said, speed dating in the transfer portal. That's exactly what it is. It is speed dating. And so you only have maybe a couple of days. Now, you can have an in-home visit. I talked to an assistant coach at one school a few weeks ago who said, I like to go see them in person to get an idea of who they are, because I don't feel comfortable just taking somebody sight unseen. But like, Dabo wants you to be at camp multiple years. Like, he wants you to come to camp as a 10th grader and as an 11th grader. And they have a real kind of robust idea. They've gotten to know your family. It just doesn't work that way in the transfer portal. It's so much faster. And the offer doesn't mean as much. And so if you're Dabo, you have to decide, do I abandon this philosophy that has worked really well for me over the years, because it's probably not going to work in the future, at least in this part of recruiting, the transfer portal part of it? Or do you keep it up and hope that somehow things will be different for you this year? I don't suspect they will. Or next year or the year after that, if they don't start embracing roster building the way you build a roster now. But at least you got to hear from him, and you can kind of empathize with where he is on that. I realize a lot of people just yell at Dabo all the time, and I've been guilty of it too. But what they had was pretty special. And they figured out a way to get players who really wanted to be there, who they could then develop. It just doesn't work that way anymore. And unfortunately, you've got to figure out, do I scrap this system that I've spent years building, that I'm really proud of, to try to do something else? Or do I go down with the ship? And that's where they're at right now. And it's going to be interesting to watch going forward, because if Clemson is not an ACC title contender this year, I think you have to make changes. You have to make fundamental change, not coaching changes, but because they ain't firing Dabo. We talk about buyouts, manageable buyouts. Clemson ain't firing Dabo. But you may have a situation where either he gets fed up with it and decides he doesn't want to do it anymore, or he has to decide, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to recruit differently. But at least you've gotten to hear and hear him explain why. Because it's easier to understand why the reluctance to do this. And I do think if he wants to change, he can. He can call Brent Venables up, who obviously worked in that Clemson system and is using pieces of that at Oklahoma. Like Oklahoma, if you're a high school recruit and you're committed and you take another visit, you're not in the class anymore. Like, you got to recommit and go through it all again. That's taken straight from the Clemson manual. But Oklahoma's also getting transfers, because Oklahoma had to get transfers. They had no other choice. They had to change the roster. They were moving to the SEC. The Lincoln Riley administration did not recruit a lot of really good linemen. They had to do something different. So Brent Venables had to adapt. I think Dabo could if he wants to. But again, it's very hard when you've built something that to you is very special. And now you've got to change it. So thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.